So about a month ago, I participated in the Ludum Dare 46 Game Jam. For those who don't know, Ludum Dare is one of the most popular game jams where you have to make a game within a given theme in a short amount of time. There are two different modes in this jam, the first one being the competition mode, where you have to make a game solo within 48 hours with assets made from scratch. And the second one is the jam mode, where you're allowed to work with other people and you instead have to make a game within 72 hours. I participated in the solo mode since I was working alone and, I was confident enough to take that challenge. So hello, my name is Joseph R. Carroll, and this is how I made a game in 2 days. Sorry, 3 days.
Hey Joseph, you miscounted again. It wasn't 3 days.
Okay, well then how long did it take me to make this game?
About 30 days.
30 days? Are you kidding me? This isn't the first time I've participated in the Ludum Dare Game Jam. My first submission was almost 3 years ago in the Ludum Dare 39 Game Jam with the theme Running Out of Power, and the game was called We're Running Out of Batteries. It was this arcade-like top-down movement game where you run around, grab batteries, bring them to the lamppost, and avoid ghosts. Though it had multiple problems because the lamppost collision was the lamppost mesh instead of a little circle collision or collision trigger at the bottom. And the ghosts didn't have any kind of collision, which would make them form on top of each other, making the difficulty of ghost spawning over time useless. But I did get the game done in time, so I guess that's really all that matters. Before I could participate in this current game jam, I still had to learn how to make games, or at least recap how to do things. I made two mini prototypes, one as a top-down shooter that barely works, and another as a 2D platformer. The reason why I did this before the jam was because I wanted to have as little hiccup time as possible from wasting too much time searching the internet for my answers. I knew not everything I needed to know was going to be on the internet, as there will be a few things I will have to figure out on my own, but as long as I knew the basics, I should be good. Fast forward to Friday, April 17th, and at about 6 p.m. Pacific time, the jam officially begins.
Alright, I think this is it. Theme is... Dude, what the heck? Alright, so it's the theme. Here we go. The theme is Keep It Alive. Alright! So, I guess we can just get started now. Right after I eat dinner, though.
Thanks to the theme, I easily brainstormed an idea I would pick for the jam. And not to brag, but I have a very special talent on coming up with ideas quickly. I didn't say they were good, but The idea I had would be this 2D platformer game where you have to go through these dangerous obstacles inside of a cave, and your main objective is to get this baby bear inside of a box back to its mother. But you must do all of that without breaking the box, or the baby bear will die and you will have to start over. Confident enough, I chose this idea and started working on the game later that night. I began using Trello and made a little to-do list organizing each task into 3 categories with 3 different color markers. The green is marked as very important, meaning that this cannot be called a game if it did not have this. The yellow is marked as somewhat important, meaning that it's not super important, but it's a good idea to add this. And the red is marked as not very important, meaning that I don't need this at all and I might not add this to the game. Once that was done, it was finally time to start booting up Unity. So it took about an hour to make this unfinished prototype of the game, adding player movement, jumping, collision, and the box physics. There was still more to fix, adding smoother controls and proper collision, but it was getting late and I decided to finish more of the game mechanics and prototype tomorrow morning. It's 8:30 a.m. with 33 hours remaining, and that was when I start working on the game again. Everything was working fine, except when it didn't. But I did get the collision working properly afterwards, not only with the platforms, but also the death mechanic both for the player and the box. The controls were better with the jumping having a cooldown instead of jumping in the air again, and the movement being more tight and easy to control. Now that the prototype was done, it was time to work on the other things that needed to be done. I learned about the Cinemachine asset package, and that helped me get the camera to follow the player properly. I know the rules say you must create assets from scratch, but if this is technically cheating, then oops. I added an enemy patrol with some simple AI that can detect the edge of the platform and turn around. The water mechanic was very hard to implement as the internet couldn't help me that much. After looking at some tutorials, I did learn about the buoyancy feature in Unity, which did help me with the box floating, but the player movement in the water was still a struggle for me. Similar to other 2D platformer games, I wanted the player to have its movement and gravity slow down whenever it would enter water. After some trial and error, I made a trigger above the water and was able to change the player's gravity and movement speed when entering the water, and then changing it back to normal when exiting the water. And finally, I added a button mechanic that would make a plank disappear. Unfortunately, it was very late, and I definitely needed some sleep for tomorrow. That was all I could do for day 1, but it shouldn't be a problem because tomorrow I only have to complete all of this. I did a bit more tweaking, making sure everything was working properly, but now that that was done, it was finally time to do the fun stuff. I brainstormed and sketched out some ideas regarding the obstacles, levels, and puzzles I was going to make. First, I was going to figure out the designs of the obstacles, including the enemies, water, lava, planks, and buttons. Then I grabbed some graphing paper and planned out this one giant downward level with 10 different sections. This helped me plan the difficulty of each section, where everything was going to go, and what was going to be in these levels. I think doing this on paper first was much better than planning and figuring out levels while you're making them in the game engine, because you'll keep running into those moments where you have to keep redoing and redesigning levels. I opened up Sprite and began making pixel art, designing the platform tile set and a few other objects and obstacles such as the triangle slopes, spikes, boxes, water flowing, lava boiling, the baby bear inside the box, a red button, and some planks. I made a simple, small yellow character with animations representing the player from its idle, running, and jumping positions and movements. I also made the enemy character with its patrolling and knife swinging animation. And with all of that completed, it should have been time to make the levels. Well, should have, because unfortunately time passed too much, and this was when I missed the 48-hour deadline that night. But that doesn't mean the jam is over, because there's still the 72-hour deadline, and I still had another 24 hours to polish and complete the game. Soon I finished designing all the levels in the game engine. All the animations for the enemies and the player were added in the game engine, but it still took a while for everything to look right. After a lot of tweaking with the levels and other game mechanics, I quickly designed the mother bear in Sprite, and then I added the ending where the baby bear finally reunites with its mother. There's nothing else other than the option to restart or exit the game. However, this was when I noticed time was running out. I was panicking a bit, trying to make sure everything was working, and the worst thing that could possibly happen happened. I tried to get everything ready and submit on time, but the submission hour deadline at 7 p.m. already passed, and I was too late. The jam was over. I was so close, but there was nothing I could do. Suddenly, sadness gazed upon me. I had no motivation to finish the game. I might as well forget it.
You know, if you want, we can always finish the game, right? Yeah, okay.
But before we get any further, I would like to show you what the game would look like if I actually submitted the game in time. So this is what it looks like. There's no timer, no checkpoints, no music and sound effects. This is just one giant maze that you have to finish. There's still multiple problems since the passes where you need the bear in order to continue were individual instead of grouped together, and you couldn't really see the passes. Two of the sections can possibly cause you to get stuck, making it impossible to progress, and the very last section was impossible to pass since you couldn't get the bear past the boxes in the water. Yes, I've tried over and over, and there's no way you can get past it. From what I said in the beginning, no, it didn't actually take me 30 days to complete the game, but it did take some time for me to say, "F it, let's finish the game. After all, it deserves to be the game I want it to be." Though I would consider the next few days a blur since I basically put this project aside and didn't work much on it afterwards. So here's a list of some of the problems I fixed. I made the passes grouped together instead of individually disappearing so that there's no weird collision involved with the player. Speaking of which, I made it so that you can actually see the passes in the game by replacing it with one of the tile sets. I really like speedrunning, and I think it's a good idea to time yourself and see how fast you can beat the game. So I added a timer at the bottom of the screen that would stop and tell you your time once you reach the end. I added some post-processing effect with the camera, giving you that nice retro arcade look. I made a simple chiptune music using the trial version of FL Studio and the Minibit audio extension, which is $20, but I got it on sale for $13. If you want to make some video game music, you can always use Bosco, which is a free and easy to use digital audio workspace that you can both download and use it on your browser. I'm not the best musician since I barely know some music theory, but I think it turned out fine. I later added sound effects using the BFXR application.
You know, the funny thing about this software is that it's not really that you just like play around the settings. Like literally the process of like creating these sound effects is like mashing your mouse button until you find the right one pretty much.
I redesigned parts of the levels that were nearly impossible or absolutely impossible to pass, and now they're not so impossible to pass by. I added a little red particle effect so that way you can kind of see some action going on after you die. And finally, I added the start menu and the objective screen telling you what's going on in this game. One of the most time-wasting features I tried to implement was the checkpoint system. No matter how many tutorials I've watched and searches I've made on the internet, it almost never worked, and it took me multiple days and loads of trial and error. And at one point it worked for a day, which meant doing the entire process all over again. In the end, I decided to scrap that entirely. With everything working properly, the game was finally completed and I submitted it on itch.io. Though the WebGL version, the one you can play on the browser, wasn't performing properly as the game barely ran. This was also one of the most time-wasting experiences as it never performed properly on my computer, yet it worked fine on any other computer. So I guess Unity WebGL hates my computer, I guess. And that brings us to today. Now, it's been more than a month since all this has happened, and I'd like to take a moment to kind of reflect on everything I did for this jam. So was this whole experience a failure? No, absolutely not. I mean, yeah, I missed a deadline, but still, I made one of the best and coolest games I ever played. I love the visuals and the gameplay's fun, and you know, in the end, I'm proud of it, and that's all that matters. Now, was this game too ambitious? Not really. I think it was fair with its scope, even after missing the deadline. However, I think the big problem was me spending way too much time tweaking and making sure everything is perfect. So really, perfectionism ruins my life. And also at the same time, I'm not one of those game developers that spends every waking hour making these games. I'm just not one of those people. If you would like to play the game, there is a link in the description to the itch.io page. You can play it both on browser and you can download it for Mac, Windows, and Linux. So that is how I made the game Barely Alive. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.